Okay, the topic that we are going to discuss today is about problems involving proportion. Now, it is very important that we will be able to formulate the correct ratio in solving problems involving proportion, so that we will be able to identify what type of proportion the problem is dealing with. In this presentation, we are going to present to you a lot of problems involving direct proportion, inverse proportion, and partitive proportion, so that we will be able to familiarize the problem and we will be able to interpret whether it is a direct proportion, inverse proportion, or partitive proportion. Okay, here's the first problem that we are going to solve. Okay, a car is able to travel 210 kilometers in 3 hours. How far can it travel in 5 hours? Now, let's now form the ratio out of the given in the problem. So, we have to compare the number of kilometers to number of hours. So that when we formulate our second ratio also, it should be in the same order. We have kilometer is to hours. In our second ratio, we will also have the same order of the ratio. We have kilometers is to hours, so that we will not be lost and we will not be able to interchange, because the moment we will be able to interchange that one, then we will be having a wrong result. That's why it is very important for us to know the formulation of the ratio. What quantity are we comparing? So in this problem, we are comparing the kilometers to the number of hours, so that when forming our ratio, it will be very easy for us to identify the given. So let us now formulate the first ratio. So according to the problem, a car is able to travel 210 kilometers in 3 hours. Therefore, there are 210 kilometers is to 3 hours. That is the first ratio that we are going to formulate. 210 kilometers is to 3 hours. Okay, let's now formulate the second ratio. Problem says, how far can it travel in 5 hours? How far? Meaning, the number of kilometers is not given. Therefore, we will represent this with letter N, because this is the unknown part of the problem. How far can it travel? So, we will still have to determine how far. So, letter N will be the substitution for the number of kilometers for the ratio. And we have N is equals to 5 hours. 5 hours is given, number of kilometers is unknown. That's why we represent it with letter N. So this is now our ratio. 210 is to 3 hours is equals to N is to 5 hours. Okay, let's now formulate the second ratio. Problem says, how far can it travel in 5 hours? How far? Meaning, the number of kilometers is not given. Therefore, we will represent this with letter N, because this is the unknown part of the problem. How far can it travel? So, we will still have to determine how far. So, letter N will be the substitution for the number of kilometers for the ratio. And we have N is equals to 5 hours. 5 hours is given, number of kilometers is unknown. That's why we represent it with letter N. So this is now our ratio. 210 is to 3 hours is equals to N is to 5 hours. Okay, we were now able to formulate the ratio as well as our proportion. Now, let us now start identifying the problem. Whether what type of proportion are we dealing with? Okay, looking at the given, we can say that there is an increase in the other quantity from 3 hours to 5 hours. And definitely, the number of kilometers will also increase because the number of travel in hours increases. So that naturally the number of kilometers will also increase. So that it goes into the definition of our direct proportion, which is one quantity increases, the other quantity also increases. Number of hours increases, so definitely number of kilometers will also increase. So that we can say this is a direct proportion. So that we will now use the concept in solving a problem involving direct proportion. Okay, since we are solving a problem involving direct proportion, then we will apply the concept of the direct proportion, which is the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. Now, since one of the missing term in our proportion is represented with letter n, and to determine the value of n, then let us perform the concept of ratio, concept of a direct proportion. We will multiply the means and we will multiply the extremes. So the means consists of the missing element in our proportion. So that if we represent it with letter n, we multiply 3 times n, we will have 3n. And we multiply the extremes, 210 times 5, we will get 1050. Now, to determine the value of n, so we will divide 1050 by 3 so that we can determine the value of n. So that if we have 210 is to 3 equals n is to 5, multiplying 3 times n will give us 3n, and multiplying 210 by 5 will give us 1050. Okay, so to find the value of n, we will divide 1050 by 3. The result will be 350. What is this 350? So this is a number of kilometers that it can travel in 5 hours. So a car can travel 350 kilometers in 5 hours. Okay, checking whether our answer is correct. Let us now substitute the value of n, which is 350. So from 210 is to 3 equals n is to 5. So we will now substitute the value of n, which is 350. So the ratio and proportion would now be 210 is to 3 equals 350 is to 5. Now to find whether these two ratios are really equal, so we will multiply the means and we will also multiply the extremes. So 3 times 350 will give us 1050. 210 multiplied to 5 will also give us 1050. So we were able to prove that the two ratios are equal and the two ratios is also a proportion. This is a direct proportion. Okay, let us now solve the second problem, and we will again identify what kind of proportion are we dealing with. Okay, problem number 2. 5 people can finish painting a house in 4 days. If only 2 people are available, how many days do they have to work to finish the job? So this is now the problem that we are going to solve. So to be able as to form a ratio out of the given problem, let us first determine what are the quantities that they are comparing. So what are they comparing? 5 people can finish painting a house in 4 days. So we have people compared to number of days. So this could be our first ratio. So that if we have 210 is to 3 equals n is to 5, multiplying 3 times n will give us 3n, and multiplying 210 by 5 will give us 1050. So let us now substitute the quantity. So 5 people is to 4 days equals, the second ratio is 2 people is to n. Why letter n? Because we will still have to determine how many days will it take for 2 people to finish the same job. So undetermined. The number of days is still undetermined. We still need to solve for the number of days since there is a decrease in the number of people doing the same job. So from 5 people, it becomes 2 people. So from 4 days, it might increase because there are only 2 people doing the painting. So let us now analyze so that we can determine what kind of or what type of proportion are we dealing with. Looking at the problem and in the ratio, we can see that there is a decrease in the number of people. So from 5 people, it was decreased into 2 people. So when only 2 people will do the painting, naturally the number of days will increase because the work that can be done by 5 people will be longer if only 2 people will do the painting. So there is a corresponding decrease in the other quantity and a corresponding increase in the other quantity. Therefore, it goes into the definition of an inverse proportion where one quantity decreases and the other quantity also increases or vice versa. So if that is the case, then we can say that this is an inverse proportion because we can clearly say see in the illustration in the problem that there is a corresponding decrease in the number of people, then naturally there will always be an increase in the number of days. So this is an inverse proportion. Okay, since this is an inverse proportion, we will apply the concept of inverse proportion so that if we have 5:4 is equals to 2:n because the number of days is still undetermined and we still have to look for that. So we will represent that with letter n. That's why we have a ratio 5:4 is equals to 2:n. So to complete the proportion and using the steps in solving inverse proportion, the product of the first and second term is equals to the product of the third and the fourth term, meaning we will multiply the first term by the second term and we will also multiply the third term to the fourth term of the proportion. So doing the multiplication, we have 5 multiplied to 4 will give us 20 and 2 multiplied to n will give us 2n. So after getting the result of our multiplication, so we have 20 equals n, 2n. So to find the value of n, we will divide 20 by 2, then we have the result of 10. So the value of n is equals to 10. Now this will now represent the missing element in our proportion. So we will now substitute the value of n. So our ratio will now be 5:4 is equals to 2:10. So multiplying the first term to the second term, we have 5 times 4, we have 20. 2 times 10, we have 20 also. So we have 2 equal ratio. Therefore, we were able to prove that this is a proportion, particularly an inverse proportion. Now we have problem number 3. John, Carlo, and James go into caroling. They agreed to have their sharing in the ratio of 2:3:5. If they were able to earn 850, how much would be their individual share? Now let's take into this. Okay, 850 will be divided. So from the whole it is being divided into parts. So 850 will be divided among the 3 in a ratio of 2:3:5. Therefore, it goes into the definition of partitive proportion, wherein the whole is being divided into parts. What whole are we talking about? The whole of their earnings, which is 850, is to be divided into parts. Why? Because they are going to divide this in the ratio of 2:3:5. Therefore, it goes into the definition of partitive proportion, which says a whole is divided into parts. So, we will apply the rule in solving problems using partitive proportion. So, to determine their individual share, so we are going to use this 2n plus 3n plus 5n. Why we use n? Because we do not know how much would be their share. So that we use n to represent the unknown. We have 2n plus 3n plus 5n is equals to 850. Meaning to say, if we will be able to add all the amount, it will be total to 350 because he will be sharing 850 in a ratio of 2:3:5. So that if we add 2n plus 3n plus 5n, we have 10n. So to get the value of n, we divide 850 by 10 and we will get 85. So how to do it in shortcut? We cross 0. What is left is 85/1. So when you divide numbers by 1, the result will still be the same. So we have 85 is the value of n. Okay, to determine whether we were able to come up with the correct value of n, so we will have the ratio 2n plus 3n plus 5n will give us 850. So we will now substitute the given, the value of n. So 2 times 85, because there will be 2 share for John and 3 share for Carlo. We have 3 times 85 plus 5 share for James, so 5 times 85. So that if we multiply 2 times 85, we have 170. 85 times 3, 255. 85 times 5 will give us 425. So adding them all will give us 850. So we were able to divide the amount exactly accordance with the ratio that we have agreed. 2:3:5. So that is how to solve problems involving partitive proportion. So you will apply the same steps if we were able to find out that the problem is dealing with partitive proportion.